Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jacob Restituto, and welcome back to the Tuto Talks podcast, my favorite music podcast in the world. Today we have an incredible guest, Tommee Profitt. Thank you so much, Tommy, for taking the time. I really appreciate you being on the channel.
My favorite podcast as well, man.
I
Thanks for having me.
appreciate that. My pleasure, dude. My pleasure. I'm looking forward to our chat. Dude, I gotta say, before we even get started, I was doing a little research on your discography, and I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, has this guy not worked on a TV show that like I haven't watched? Like every single TV show that I watch, I'm like, this guy has a placement here, he's a placement here. I'm like, shoot, this is
Oh
crazy,
man.
man. I don't the
Yeah, it's
amount of
been a
work you
blast,
get
man.
out. Absolutely.
Yeah. It's been a blast. It was kind of an unexpected door into like the TV film world, but it was kind of always my dream. I just didn't really know
Mm.
it would actually be a possibility to get into that kind of stuff. So as soon as that door cracked, I kind of like ran through it and shoved the door open, and I've been running down that ever since.
No, that's phenomenal, man. I want to hear so much about that. But before we get into that, I want to hear a little bit about your backstory. And I know you started producing music when you were 12. How did that come about,
Uh-huh.
and how did you go from there?
My parents like bought me this small keyboard when I was a kid, just because it made noise, and kids like
Nah.
toys that make noise. And I was just like so fascinated by that keyboard. Like I would never stop playing it. So they quickly bought me headphones, which didn't help much with the noise, honestly, because I was just pounding. And so like I don't know what's better to listen to. It was like an electric drum kit, where they have headphones and they're pounding the stick. It was like me doing that with my fingers, and so um, I just was always on it, trying to learn things by ear that I heard on TV
Hmm.
and radio or whatever. And I just started writing songs on the piano. That's like how I started. And then when I was 12, my dad had this software on his computer that was like the music notation, software.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would click in the notes and play stuff and like produce like MIDI music, like instrumental music.
Sure.
That would probably be similar to the 12-year-old version of what I do now, like kind of cinematic, you know what I mean? Like just video game music or background score music or whatever. And I would sell those CDs. I would make CDs of all this music and sell them at my school and at my church and like all my friends. Like I would just like, I started selling albums and starting this like thing. And it just kind of was growing over time, just being known as like being known synonymously with music, you know what I mean? The
Mm.
music guy. And I worked hard at that. So like if people needed a piano player or music for something, they would, you want to be the first person that someone thinks of to ask,
Hmm.
you know what I mean? So I was staying busy with doing stuff like that. Um, yeah, and I've always done that. I've always just produced my own music, and I used to travel with a band, and like we toured and we did that for 12 years. Um, but still, I only produced my own music during this time. I just didn't even think about producing other people for some reason.
Sure.
And then once I started having kids and it was hard for me to travel as much, I built a studio. Me and my wife were like, what if I tried to like record other people's music? That's something I never tried. And then that's like when things really started like taking off. And so I just started my own little business in my basement producing in this home studio. You know what I mean?
That's amazing. Do you often have artists coming into your studio, or do you send them the tracks and they record in their own studio, or how does that typically work?
Yeah, almost always they're here in the room.
Hmm.
I have a mic right next to me and everyone likes to stand there.
No,
So
that's cool, man.
yeah,
Your
I
list
used
got
to I used to have a vocal booth, and then no one used it. Like no one no one wanted to go into a separate room where they couldn't see you. And so
Hmm.
when I built this studio, I didn't even put a vocal booth in it because no one uses them really anymore. So
You know, it's funny you say that because I've been noticing that, especially like in like these live recordings where like you get footage of these artists in these studios, and I'm like, why isn't anybody in a vocal booth? And I'm like, or they're recorded in
they're
hotel
right in the
rooms or
room.
anything. Yeah,
Yeah, they're right in the room next to the desk, and you just put headphones on, and they have the shields of foam
yeah,
around the mic. That does wonders. Like that actually works really well. So
yeah.
that's what everyone does. Any home studio here, I'm in Nashville, right? And so any home studio of a producer you go to, you'll see their desk and their speakers, and then you'll see a mic right next to the desk.
It's pretty
That's how
amazing,
that's
man.
how people do it now. So, yeah, it's
Yeah,
awesome.
it's the industry's changing for sure. So
Yeah.
So you started producing. You mentioned your wife actually, and when you mentioned you and your wife said, what if you did this on your own? Is she in the music industry as well, or is she just a supporter of what you do?
She is not. Um, nope, she's not musical at all. And I love that. I mean, that's one of the
For sure,
things,
I hear
like
that.
it's such a refreshing thing to like step outside of work completely for your relationship,
Oh yeah.
and your marriage. And I mean, we've been dating since high school, so we like go way back before I did music, like for a job.
I relate to that tremendously because my wife and I started dating when we were in high school as well, and
Oh, that's awesome.
we're about 12 years in now, so like before music and anything. So
That's amazing, man. Yeah, we're 13, so we're right there
oh
with you.
shoot, oh that's wild. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. That's funny. But yeah, so she's a nurse, so she's completely not in the music industry as well. So like, she's we
Nice.
have I always wanted to start this podcast with her, and she's a recluse from the video. Like I'm like I'll be on the video all the time, and she's like I never want to be on video. So, but
Yep.
I wanted to call it two sides of the brain because like I'm the creative and she's the complete opposite. Well, she is very can be creative, but she's a scientist, quote unquote. With her,
Right. Yeah.
But who knows, man?
That's crazy.
That's funny. So you started producing for other people. You built your own studio. How do you build these connections where you've worked with even your artist list, dude? You've worked with everybody from Migos to Avril Lavigne, NF, which you have a 6-time platinum track with NF, to Toby Mac, to Chris Tomlin, to Carrie Joe. Bro, your list is pretty remarkable. How do you start from your own band and your own music to then your first artist?
Dude, it was a crazy thing. Like, I was traveling a lot, right? And when I made that decision to build a studio in my basement, like, I I didn't really tell anyone that I was doing it. It was just kind of on my own. I'm like, I'm gonna build a studio and then see if I could get work, and maybe in a couple of years I could like produce full time. Like that was my goal. And we built the studio, and once the studio was finished, within 5 days, I had like 9 months of bookings lined up, and I'm like, what?
Wow.
How is this?
Oh
I'm
my
like, how is this
gosh.
possible? Because I didn't even tell anyone. So, like, I cannot not attribute it to being a God thing. Like,
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
out of control, out of the picture. Like, I didn't do anything. I didn't even tell anyone. And so, I I would get random emails, dude, from people. Like, there's a guy from South Dakota that randomly emailed me and said, "Hey, I found this music video on YouTube. I love your sound. Do you record other people?" And then this
Mm.
woman from Florida, this girl from New York, this other kid from Ohio, like they just started emailing me and said, "Hey, I heard from another person that you do music, or you just made a studio," and they just started like coming. So I had to like quickly figure out like a business model, right? Like I didn't know anything. How much do I charge per song? How long are these albums going to take me? Like how to stagger them. Like I had to figure all that out really quickly. And of course you don't figure it out for a couple of years, right? So you kind of put something together, and then you have to live through it
Yeah.
for months to figure out, whoa, I need to change this or change this. I'm way
Yeah.
behind. That's not enough for the amount of time I'm working on it, And
Yeah.
so, and then honestly, 1 month into that, I already knew Nate, NF. Before that, we kind of just connected through one of his friends sent me his music or whatever. And so I really just, we kind of loosely knew each other. And about a month into having my own studio, he texted me one night and was just like, "Hey man, I'm gonna be in town for one night. You want to hang out?" Wasn't even like, let's work. It was like, let's hang
Hmm.
out. And so I was like, "Yeah, man, I just built a new studio. Come over." And that night we ended up making a song that ended up making it to the desks of labels that got him signed, and then got me signed as
Wow.
a partner. And that was just like a crazy life-changing pivot point. Pretty quickly, like after having that studio, and we talk about that too, because he's like, "Dude, I almost didn't text you," and I was like, "Dude, I almost said I was too busy and couldn't do it." For whatever reason, like we just kind of, another God thing. Like we just
Yeah.
like, yeah, let's hang out, and then we did a song, and that was kind of what started like his
Which
career, my official career.
which track was that for you guys?
A song called "Wake Up" was on
Okay.
his first album.
Okay.
So that was the first song we really did together for him
Yeah.
and his music. And then we did some other songs after we knew that it was getting some notice or whatever. And he honestly, dude, I'll just be honest, I was like expecting to just continue working on these indie projects, and I was like, oh sweet, he's getting signed, like good for him. And I just thought it'd be his journey. He was the one that was like adamant about, I'm not even going to sign unless I can work with Tommee. And I was like, what? Like he was a 22-year-old kid, you know, with him, you know what I mean? And just pretty bold, and he's a loyal guy. And so I wasn't expecting to like come along for the ride with him.
Sure.
But he kind of pushed for that, and it's been awesome. I mean, now we're, you know, best friends making music together. Yeah. So
it's amazing, awesome, man. And so like I mentioned in the original message that I sent to you, a lot of these interviews that I do is like, I want to, you know, hear people's stories, but also encourage people that want to take the leap of faith into their career through these stories, right? Because, you know, there was a million people telling me that it's impossible to make a career in music, and I've always been like, no, I want to show that that's actually not the case. As long as you stink and work your butt off and, you know, take that leap, it's possible. And one of the things that I really found interesting in the threads throughout your story, from when you were 12 years old to, you know, working with Nate and even everything in between, it seems that there was a lot of saying yes. You just said, hey, I want to be the music guy. Yes, I'll play the piano. Yes, I'll write that score. Yes, I'll work with this guy from Florida and this guy, you know. And there was also, it takes a bit of humility in that too. You know, it's like, of course, everybody wants to work, you know, with the Eminems of the world and everything. But like, it's like, hey, let me just, whatever I can get kind of thing, I think is really important. I also think it's really important just to say yes in the sense of getting your feet wet, you know. So I think so many artists and business owners in general, but artists are like, oh, I have to have all my ducks in a row before I can start. I need the studio, I need the microphone, I need to have the business plan, I know how, and like myself, and you just mentioned too, it's like you just start and then you figure it out, and you're like, shoot, I'm working $12 an hour, you know, like this should be $60, whatever, you know, 600, whatever the case is. I'm like, way too cheap. Okay, the next one I gotta charge more. Or, you know, oh, I haven't gotten a gig in a month, I'm charging way too much. You know, it's like you just learn as you go.
Bro, this is probably the thing I'm most passionate about talking about. Like this whole thing, this process. And I preach this. I go to colleges and talk to students and stuff. And like, I just try to let them know, like, the level of tenacity that you have to have, I think, is underestimated. Like, you know, I worked basically from the time I was 12 to 30, I was grinding until it like really became a thing. And the brand, you know, I feel like people really get stuck on like their brand, their first launch, and their strategy, their release strategy. And like in 2 years, they're going to release one song, you know what I mean? And it's like that, the music you're putting out right now is probably not the music or brand that you will be doing in 10 years when you are a full-time musician, if you're working towards that. You know what I mean? Like, you can change. I'm doing different music now than I was doing several periods throughout my whole, you know, life. And so like, you just kind of work through different seasons and learn things and get better and grow the contacts list, if you want to call it that, you know, just kind of organically. You have, word of mouth has to spread, and you have to have a thing that is making buzz. And like, you can't do that if you're putting out one song in 2 years. Like, put out 2 albums in 2 years, you know, or 30 singles, whatever, you know.
I could not. That's my business structure or model as a musician. I put out as much music as I can because it drives me insane that like all my friends around me, I'm like, hey, you finished that EP yet that we talked about 3 years ago? Yeah, you know, it's like, come on, dude, I just want to hear your music, man. It's I completely understand. And
that whole thing that's like, sorry, the whole thing that's like, well, you know, and there's like I hate that. I'm like, bro, like, you just have to put stuff out. And like, and I have music that was out that I've taken down just because that's not the picture of what I do now, or like those were stepping stones till I could learn to do something, you know what I mean, that I'm more proud of. And so I think people can't get past that. You know what I mean? They don't want to put something out that's not like polished, like the brand new Taylor Swift record or the brand new Kanye record. And they're listening to these like world-class people that have worked on these world-class projects after working for 30 years on something. And like, just know, like, you can't have that level in the beginning, and it's okay. Like, you're supposed to be growing a small fan base among friends and peers, and then their friends and peers, and slowly start locally and then regionally and then grow. You know what I mean? Like it can't just be this overnight thing. And
Yeah.
nowadays the world really is like instant gratification. We want to have 1 million streams overnight, and it's just not. That's going to be a letdown every time that's your expectation, you know?
Yeah, man, dude. There's so many things that I want to hit on that you talk about because I relate to them so tremendously. And it's
Yeah.
really interesting. The more and more of these, like I mentioned before we started, I've done you probably number like 80, 85 of these interviews. And the people that have had some serious success in their career, the theme is exactly the same. They say, you know, like you can't expect to sound like essentially them in on your first release, or you like that people like always chasing, oh, what plugin do I need to buy, what microphone do I, and it's like, no, it doesn't matter. It's like the fact that I have 35 years of experience hearing 600,000 songs and working on 5,000
Right.
songs, like that. It's like that's why I can do
It,
what I can do. It's not the plugin, it's just it's so interesting.
it is hours put in. It's the hours put in. It's always the hours put in. Cause
Hmm.
I tell people this too, like you could watch 100,000 hours worth of tutorials on YouTube or pay for them, whatever. And if you're just watching 100,000 hours and then you go and sit down, you're not going to be any better than when before you watch those tutorials, because
Yeah.
you have to like figure out how to apply certain things. It's trial and error. You're going to try things. It's not going to work. You're going to find what does. You're going to find your own favorite plugins. You know what I mean? I used to watch some of these tutorials when I first started, and I was like, what's the best way to mix, a kick drum or a vocal or whatever. And then I'm like skipping through, and it's like an hour-long thing of these small tweaks, and I just didn't have the patience for it, right? So I'd skip to the end, and I'd listen to it, and I'd be like, I don't even like the way that sounds. Like, that's just not the way I like the way, because mixing is just a preference. It's not one right way to mix anything. There's not. And so some people like drums pushed more. Some people like music way back or way forward. I mean, it's just all kinds of different preferences and styles and mixing. So you just have to find your sound, and how do you like the kick to sound? How do you like the drums and the vocals to sound, and all, you know what I mean?
Absolutely. And I think personally the beauty of putting out so much music is the fact of like this song requires A, this song requires B. So like, this song that I'm releasing right now might require front heavy drums, while this one might not have any drums. Right. And like learning how to balance the songs totally different. Like where if you just do this one song for 2 years, you're only going to get decent at that one thing. But you're trying all these different things and genres and synths and strings, and
I think just so growing as a globe, like all around, being versatile as a musician, being able to do different things, you know what I mean? I think that is important, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like you just said, learning how to do several different styles, or just knowing theory. Like, dude, I use theory every day in my head. Like that's like I'm big on that. Like that's so important. And people are like, oh, I don't need to know that. But like even when you're tuning vocals, like you have to know the key of the song to know which notes. Oh, that's not even in the key of the scale. You know what I mean? Like what note are they trying to sing? And like all that stuff, man, is like important to incorporate globally and into music,
I couldn't relate more to that. Absolutely, man. Did you go to school for music, or is it all self-taught?
I did. I was self-taught through my younger years, and I kind of like would take lessons on and off.
Sure.
But I would always just end up playing by ear, and so I never really found something that stuck. But then I went to a small college in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's called Grace Christian University now, but they had a really amazing music program. But they have a really amazing music program, and being small, it was kind of like you got a lot of opportunity on campus. So you didn't have 1,000 people signing up for the studio. You know what I mean? There were only a handful, and they weren't even using it. So I was like in the studio all night, every night. I would be in the studio working till 5 a.m. and then I'd sleep on the couch, and at 8 a.m. I'd walk down the hall to my other classroom, you know what I mean? And just be there for class. Like I was like always in there. But I learned music theory there, and I learned audio production there. And so, I had a friend that my first semester there, he was a junior, senior. He pulled me into the studio and started recording me. So I had like early exposure to like Pro Tools and like
Sure.
full on producing a song with all the senior players like playing drums and guitar and bass, you know what I mean? And to me, it was like, what is happening? This is the best thing in the world, you know what I mean? And so I've always been just addicted to it, you know what I mean? When all my friends were going out and like doing, you know, Applebee's appetizers and movies and stuff, I really was just like, I can't go, I got to go in the studio. And like, I was just really disciplined to like pour into that more than anything else, you know?
Absolutely, man. I completely relate to that, and it's really interesting. I don't know if you get these kinds of messages, but I get a lot of message where it's like people saying, you know, like, hey, I'm thinking about the fact that I want to be a musician. Like, you know, do you have any tips or kind of things? And to some degree, I'm like, of course, yeah, absolutely. I have, you know, I'll give you some tips here and there. But the other hand of that is like, I don't know if I remember thinking about being a musician. I just feel like it was like I had to do this. Like this is what I needed to do, kind of thing. It's like, and like you said, if you're on the fence about it, you're not going to stay into the studio until 5 a.m. and then sleep for 3 hours and go to class at 8. Like those are the things that you feel like you need to have to make it in this. And this industry sucks, man. There's so much rejection and you know, slaps in the face and people like not responding and all this stuff. Like of course in any industry. But I just feel like because you're putting yourself out there to some degree, more than like, you know, maybe as like a 9 to 5 job, it hurts. And if you're not like fully devoted, like this is what I have to do, you're not. There's no way you're gonna last.
100%. Yeah, and you see these artists that like they don't let the rejection stop them.
Yeah.
They just have this attitude and mentality of like, I'm gonna keep going and doing my thing, no matter who rejects it. Like there's people that are liking it and I'm making it for them, or even I'm just making it for me. Whoever likes it can like it. Mm-hmm. But they have to create, like you said, you know. Someone one time said to me too, they were like they were talking about people who make it in music versus people who don't, and like the passion behind it. They're like, how much music is enough? Because if playing the guitar for 1 hour on a Saturday is enough for you, like that's fine, it can be a hobby. But if you literally can't, like, all you're thinking about is that next song you're working on in the middle of, and you're eating faster so you can get to the studio, and you're rushing everything because all you want to do is that, and like you're never getting tired, and that passion is driving every decision in your life. Like that is literally, I think, like I know the level that is required in order to make it. There's too many people that are that are busting their butt to doing that. You know what I mean? And sometimes the best musicians aren't discovered. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like
it's so interesting, man.
Yeah, like those opportunities, like there's not a formula for success, or there's not this ingredients that for sure will lead to success or being signed or whatever it is. Like it really is just you just put in the work and do your thing. And sometimes people, man, are super successful just being in their own house, their own indie business, like recording people, and they're not known like around the world or whatever, but like you don't need that to be a successful musician.
Yeah, and it all depends on how you define success.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. Like it really is more about having joy and being fulfilled and satisfied with what you're working on than just trying to chase either numbers or followers or people knowing what you do, because sometimes when you chase that, you end up working on stuff that you aren't as passionate about, and that can suck you dry faster than anything, you know?
100%, man. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So that's so interesting. I'm super curious now on your process of production, in the sense of like you produce these songs. Do you do all the mixing and mastering too? Do you just produce them? What is that process? What do you have your hands on with these songs?
Yeah, I mix and master everything that I do just out of necessity. I learned out of necessity in the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I just worked really hard to try to figure out different things about it. Like I was never like the super scientific mix engineer. You know what I mean? I just almost by ear, in a sense, like just figured out things that sound the way that I liked the way they sounded. I like the way that sounds. And mastering, I just had to do it. So I've always done that. But I do like to mix the stuff that I work on. I don't take outside like mix jobs. Like people send me stuff and I mix or master. I mix the stuff that I do because, you know, every song you do is like your baby and you care about it. And
Sure.
different people, like we just talked about, different people have different styles and preferences and mixes. And so if someone puts all the faders at 0 and then they start over and create their own vision for it, it just might not be what you thought it would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I kind of mix as I go. So when I'm all done, it's like 85% of the way there. And then I just kind of spend an hour and tweak and fix it up or whatever. But yeah, I've just always done that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mix as I go too, and it's interesting that I don't know how artists don't do that in the sense of like, how do you hear what you want kind of thing? Like, how do you know where you want to go with the song without being like, oh, we need a big reverb tail going in here, swishing into this section. That like, it's like that's the creativity, and like that's also mixing. But it's like, how do you know?
Right. Yeah, I don't get it
don't know.
either. I mean, I guess sometimes there's like, okay, well, we know the song needs drums, bass, guitars, piano, and they just kind of throw it all in, and they just know like it'll be taken care of later, you know. But I guess if it's more of that style song, but yeah, like placement and levels and EQ and effects is, to me, that's like the creativity of the track itself, the production. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, absolutely. If you looking back on like what do you find the most important part of producing for you? Like what is that your personal like? This is, let me rephrase that in 2 ways. What's your favorite part of producing, you know, this track, and then what do you think is like the most important that'll make the song, you know, really enjoyable for the listener?
My favorite part of producing is, I mean, for sure, building the tracks. Like I'm a piano guy, right? And so I play every instrument on the keyboard. Like I get to play the parts in, and that's part of the fun for me. You know, and people ask sometimes, I use a lot of strings, and people are like, do you ever get like live strings recorded? And like, I've done it 3 times maybe in my whole career, but like, it's not because, well, one, it's faster, and sometimes I don't have the luxury of booking out a whole, you know, string section and 2 weeks from now and then listening, and you know, it's just faster for me to do it. But it's also that'd be giving away the most fun part for me. You know what I mean? Because I like to play all the parts individually. So that is funnest. And then you said, oh, the most important. I mean, honestly, I think transitions and transition effects are super huge. I mean, even small things like putting a crash or an impact or something at like the downbeat of the chorus, or a rise up into it, or a swell. Like when I'm all done with the song, I spend some time only working on transitions and effects.
Wow, very interesting.
Like, I mean, I do some along the way, but
Sure.
like that's kind of more of an afterthought, I guess. And sometimes I really stack stuff, and I mean, it's like, you know, it'll be 10, 18 tracks of effects or transitions, you know. And I do a lot of trailer music, so I use a lot of like trailer effects and sound effects. They're just my favorite thing to use, but they make a huge difference. You know what I mean? It really can change a song from feeling like a demo to like a fully produced song. It's like those extra added things. People call it ear candy, I guess. You know what I mean? Or little sounds that come in to make sure like the second half of the verse, something's added and lifted, and you know, you don't want like the same elements in the whole song the whole time, or it's just really linear and it's not exciting, or it doesn't grow or something. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I totally relate to that. It's actually really interesting to hear how much of a difference these transitions and everything you mentioned actually make. Even the simplest form of a transition, like cymbals, once you like add this, even like you kind of have a demo of a song, you add the cymbals, it's like, this is a whole new song. You know what I mean? And then obviously you take it further than that. I'm just saying that it's like that the simplest of transitions will actually make a tremendous difference.
Oh, it changed the whole song. Completely agree.
Absolutely.
Completely agree. Yeah.
So super selfish question. Now that you talked about the strings, I am so curious if you could give a tip or two on these realistic string sounds, because like obviously you're working with MIDI, so like how are you getting these MIDI strings to sound so real?
Well, I have to confess, I have a chronic addiction to sound libraries, specifically string libraries. So when a new one comes out, I mean, I'm like the target of all these companies. They send me their emails. They're like, "Oh, we'll get them. We're suck them in." And I see a new one's out, and I'm like, oh, "I don't have that one. I don't need it, but I don't have it." Like a collection. Like I'm a hoarder of string libraries.
Sure.
And so I probably have like 70 string libraries, and that's just like specifically string libraries. If you added like full orchestra libraries that include strings also, I'd probably have over 100. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is sad and embarrassing. I admit it. But like through that process, like honestly, there's little gems in all of them, right?
Sure. Absolutely.
And so there's patches that I'm like, I will never use this. But then there's patches that I put in almost everything, like little hit, you know, oh, this spiccato or this pizzicato or this legato, this cello, that violin. Like I've kind of found like, you know, things throughout some of them. But I will say, like, I have a couple of favorites. Obviously, I don't mind sharing it all. Like I talk about them a lot. The Berlin Strings by Orchestral Tools has been like one of my favorite string libraries for the past 6 years since I found it. It's just the best sounding that I've ever heard, and you can do a lot with it. You know what I mean? And they have a couple expansions, and so they're expensive, but like you get what you pay for with sounds. That's what I always tell people. I mean, investing in one good string library is better than investing in, you know, 10 libraries that are just kind of mediocre, you know? So, Berlin Strings and Spitfire's BBC Orchestra is crazy. That's really good too, because you can range from small to really big all in the one library, solo and ensemble. And so I layer a lot of stuff. And so among all these different libraries, you know, like I'll put Berlin Strings, like the first chairs up first, and then Berlin Strings ensemble below that. And then I'll accent it with, you know, another library. And then Tina Guo cello from Cinesamples is like unbelievable, the legato patch in that. So I'll use that for like to make the cello lines stand out.
It's pretty remarkable how you're even just talking about layering this orchestra in the DAW.
Like I build it up. Cine Brass Pro, like I use monster low brass and 12 horns ensemble, like in everything, and then figuring out the volume placement so it feels like a big orchestra without being too like brassy. But dude, then like playing it, like I play everything in legato. So instead of like pulling up this just big string ensemble and then just block chording everything, like I'll pull up, you know, a violin 1 and I'll play 3 octaves of a melody on legato. So it can kind of like transition to every note and I figure out the part I want. And then I'll pull the violin 2 and do 3 octaves of that, but do a harmony either below or above, whatever, you know, feels right. And then I'll add in bass and cello and do a harmony in the cello, all on legato. And I found that like, wow, that takes obviously 20 times longer than just block chording a big string thing. When you can do individual parts like that, that's where it feels more realistic, because you're actually moving differently, because you can't really like do that. You don't have, you know what I mean? You don't have enough fingers to do all that and change, and your brain can't like keep up with that. So doing that, the transitions on legato to like glide up, you know, versus like, you know, just cutting, like it's, that's one of the things I found that helps with the realism, I guess you could say. Harmonies too. Some people just do octaves of like one violin thing, and that always sounds like MIDI. But as soon as you add a harmony, I feel like then it starts to feel more like a string section.
Sure. Are you then, after the fact, after you produce all this and put it all in, are you then articulating it and automating like the swells and stuff, or how does that, or that coming with the patch, or how does that, like, because that seems also like a lot of work too, like to go in there and be like, you know, this swells here and then that comes in, then it swells again, and then.
No, since I'm doing each part individually with one hand, I'm riding the mod wheel.
Oh wow,
constantly,
cool, very
while
cool.
I'm recording it.
So you're creating that effect as you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, cool.
And if I like barely mess up a little bit somewhere, I'll just go in and correct that
Yeah,
mod
yeah, yeah.
wheel. But most of the time, if I mess up, I just like start over, undo, redo it with the mod wheel to get it right. And then like getting the swell to come. I mean, that's huge. If you have the mod wheel like just straight across, no matter how high or low it is, if it's just across, it's not going to feel as real as the growing and
Absolutely.
swelling. I mean, that's the essence of string playing, is that emotion in the dynamics.
Absolutely. No, and that's, I think, really important. I think that's a really great tip for people that want to work with strings. Absolutely. I want to be respectful of your time, so I want to just ask a couple more questions for you.
Yeah, dude, I'm good.
Oh, cool. I appreciate that. Your sync work, like I said, every single TV show I've probably watched in the past 2 years, you've probably worked on, dude. Everything from
Oh, man.
Grey's Anatomy to Love Island, Inventing Anna. I just finished that. Station 19, The Good Doctor. You've worked on like everything, man. It's pretty wild. And then not to mention like things like ESPN and the NFL and stuff like that. I've noticed though, in a lot of your sync stuff, you use a lot of the same singers, like Rule, and Fleury.
Ruel, Flurry, yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to talk about that. I found that very interesting. Are those like your go-to singers for this stuff? How does that work?
So there's a small group of us in Nashville that do TV film stuff. Like Ruel is really well known for sync stuff. Flurry is known for sync stuff. She has some pop artist stuff also. I have a buddy named Sam Tenez who does kind of both as well. Yeah, I just have a lot of friends that do sync, and we like to collaborate. And, I've probably done more songs with Flurry than anybody else. So you kind of gravitate towards, oh man, like every time we work on a song, like there's a lot of traction on that. It's used a lot of times. We have a song called Soldier that we did 7 years ago. It was one of the first sync songs we've ever done. It was the first song we did together. And that song over the years has continued to place 20 something times, like in 20 different shows or movies. Like it's just being used over and over. And I think it's just a combination of like something like that is just when you find different partnerships that really work well. And her voice is so so signature for her, and it's perfect for sync. It's perfect for TV film to start soft with like, 2 piano notes and then her soft voice doing something, and then building to this big orchestral thing. And she has ethereal stuff that she can stack. And it's just, that has worked. It's been a big part of my sound and her sync success as well. And so,
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I mean, I was listening to a couple tracks in your sync list, and I was listening to her voice, and I was like, this sounds like literally every TV song that's on TV right now. So she has this, like you said, either she's created this kind of thing, or like it just fits really well into it, or like it's like this brand of TV music that's very popular at the moment, and it fits right into it.
And she's specifically, we've done some covers, but she's specifically an insane writer. Like she'll come up with lines and concepts. I'm like, where does one even think of that? That's insane. And so when we get together, she kind of like leads the lyric side. I'll lead the music and production stuff. And we're just fast because she's so quick on that. And then we can focus on her strengths.
Yeah.
I don't say, oh, I don't like that line. And she doesn't say, no, I don't like that sound. We just kind of like affirm and let each other do what we let each other do what we do. And we do some crazy stuff sometimes. And then we do like some straightforward ballad stuff. And like, it's fun to not have like, what's the word? Not to have any resistance on the track side or the lyric side. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a handful of people like in town that I'm just friends with, and we like to collaborate often, but I think I'm about to start expanding beyond that circle that I've been working with. And I've been talking to some people online. Some people, man, I'm just finding on like TikTok or Instagram randomly. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this kid has like an unbelievable voice. And I'll just reach out and be like, dude, we should work on something for TV and film. So I think I'm excited about that. Like just kind of like collaborating with some brand new people, and trying some different stuff.
Absolutely. So I'm curious on the process of writing for those. Does NBC come to you and say, "Hey, we need something like this," or do you just write what you want and then if it fits somewhere, it fits somewhere?
So, when writing, when like a show gives you a specific thing that's called like a brief, right? Like, here's a brief, and it describes the scene or the show and what they want, some words and the sound and the tone. I've done that maybe 4 or 5 times.
Oh, wow, okay.
All of it is like, and just because, like, it puts you in a box a little bit. It's like, you have to write this way.
Sure.
And sometimes you'll get in the room and that day, whatever you're feeling, like you're just not feeling that and you want to do something else. So I like to leave it open creatively. Like, we like to just make stuff that sounds like it would be in a show or a movie or a trailer.
Mm-hmm.
And then we put it out and we have people that pitch it, all over the world. And then we get emails randomly that'll say, hey, Netflix wants to use this song in this episode of their show, or NBC wants to use this in the promo for their new summer whatever. And so they license to use these songs where they see that it fits. But it's not like, oh, here's the scene from The Good Doctor, pull it up and score it or write to it or for it. It's really like, oh, cool, it ended up in The Good Doctor. We didn't know where it'd go,
Yeah, man.
And I just like that better. It's more fun to
sure
be surprised where it ends up,
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. That's a cool. Yeah, and then where it can end up 5 years from now, like you mentioned before, like that song "Soldier."
Yeah,
which is pretty remarkable that now you have this massive catalog that could really be used. Like, it's not like a song that can only be used once. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually really cool that you have this catalog that's continually growing. That it's pretty remarkable, actually. Again, going back to just releasing music, putting out music. What if you only put out one song for your sync?
Right. And dude, what's really fun too is, like, I'm finding, like, the music is really, like, it streams well too. Like, there's people that listen to cinematic music, but it's not really in the industry. It's not really considered a genre. Like, it's not really, like Apple Music doesn't have a cinematic in their genre list. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But there's millions of people, man, on YouTube especially. There's channels with millions and millions and millions of subscribers that, like, people listen to this epic music because it makes their life feel like a soundtrack. It's like that was the most epic drive to soccer practice ever. You know what I mean?
I'm ready to score all the goals.
it pumps them up, or like when they're working out or running, like people like this kind of music. You know what I mean?
I just joined my church softball league, and we have our first game tonight. On my way to the game, I'm gonna be bumping some cinematic music.
Do it.
I'm gonna say this one's for Tommee.
Best game of your life is coming.
But I think I read somewhere. I think your Spotify, if I'm correct, has like about 4.7 million monthly listeners. Does that number sound right? So that's a lot of listeners, though, especially for that very, very niche genre of music. It's not like it's like pop music that's played on whatever radio station. It's very specific style. So that's a tremendous, actually. I wanted to actually highlight that because you mentioned that it streamed well, but I wanted to actually show how well it actually really streams. It's pretty impressive, actually.
Well, and the reason I said that too is, like, some songs might place in a TV show and not stream well, or both. Some song might stream really well, but it hasn't been in a show yet, at least. It's not placing, but people are listening to it. And so it's all over the board. And I kind of like that. Like, I'm just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff out. It's not always like, oh, it has to be this dark cinematic stuff. Like, some of the stuff is, like, really just beautiful, light piano string stuff, like, it's kind of all, like, composer cinematic covers, or it's all different kind of stuff. So there's a variety within TV film is actually a huge variety. It's not, some people might think of one thing, but there's several different avenues that you could go in it. You know what I mean? And so it's been fun, man. You just never know. It's unexpected. Like that In the End cover that me and Flurry did, like, it's the biggest song probably that we'll ever be a part of over anything else. It went viral, like, on TikTok. and around the world and everything. It has like 47 billion streams now. Like, I don't even know how to comprehend that number. You know
Wait,
what I mean?
wait.
Billion.
Are you serious?
47 billion. I'm like Capital just told me that. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's in 44 of those are on TikTok. It's like one of the most used songs on the entire platform of TikTok. People using it in their creations and getting
Well,
millions of views and all.
see, that's funny because I before we started, I listened to it and I was like, this sounds so. Where have I heard this? Where have I heard this? Now, that makes a lot more sense. I didn't realize that it was that's remarkable, man. Congratulations.
But it's well, no, and I'm saying it's like I don't even know what, like, why did that song? The other songs I like better,
stop!
even like
Yeah,
that, whatever it is. Like,
I hear
people,
you so
people
clearly.
use that for like landscape reels and dining reels and gymnastics, like all kinds of stuff. People dance to this music on Instagram and TikTok, and it's like you never know when one song out of 100, like, why did it do a thing? Like,
That is
it's
the
not like,
crux.
all right, we're gonna go for the 47 billion track today, guys, and we tried for it. You know what I mean? That song actually probably took less time than most of the other songs. We just did it in a day just to do a cover. You know what I mean? Like, it's random. And that's why it's important, like we talked about, like getting out songs, more and more songs. Like, one song might take off and it will change everything. You never know, you know?
Dude, I'm hysterical laughing because it's the crux of the music industry. You work so hard in this masterpiece, and people are like, yeah, that's cool. And then you're like, hey, let's do a cover song. And then it's like the biggest song of your career so far. And it's just, I guess that's the fun of it, because it's like you never stinking know, man. And like, it's a pain in the butt sometimes. 100%.
Yeah.
100%. But it's like,
everyone.
Sometimes you're like so pumped to release a song, you put it out, people are like, yeah, it's a cool song, and then you, like I said, oh, this has 12 tracks, took me 36, I wrote it on the plane to Nashville. It's like one of my best music videos that happened. I wrote the song on the plane to Nashville, so that from New York to Nashville, however long that took, and then it has 12 tracks in it, and then the music video is 5 shots of me in my driveway that I'm just cutting between singing the songs. Probably took me like an hour to edit, my best performing music. It's like, really, guys? And I spent 6 hours out in the cold filming this video, and it's like...
Right. No, dude, that's more often than not the thing that you want to be your biggest thing is not.
It's so funny, bro. It's so funny.
But it's fun, man. It's just fun to just ride the unexpected journey of like what's, yeah, and it's not being driven by, I hope this gets viral on TikTok.
Absolutely.
I hope this is my biggest music video. Like, we're just creating stuff that we love and that we're passionate about. And whatever does a thing, does a thing. You know what I mean? But like, if you're driven by the creativity of the thing you're working on and not the listens or what it does because you think it will work or has a sound, like, I think it's always going to be better to just focus on the creativity side of it, you know?
I feel like to some degree it's hard to stay in that place, but it's super important to stay disciplined, to stay in that place, because it's so tempting and so easy to get caught up in the streams, the analytics. And even as a businessman, you're like, oh, well, what could have been better? Why didn't this do well? Like, you look at it like a business thing, and it's like, it's important to look at that, but it's also like, well, that's not the end goal. I'm not putting this out for it to get all the streams, What's the goal of the music?
It'll just be a letdown, like I said. Like, it'll be discouraging if you're expecting it to be your biggest thing and you're just watching every minute. You're watching the streams. It's moving so slow. You know what I mean? Like, you just have to, like, put it out. And then most of the time when you put something out, like, it's never your current thing. Most people, when they put something out, an album, they're already working on something else that they're more excited about. So it's almost like you're never keeping up with releasing the thing you're most excited about.
That's really interesting. Sure.
You're always releasing something that you did months ago.
Yeah.
And you have to get it out because that's why you made it. But you want to always, you want to, like, always be working on something else. And I think that will help you with focusing so much on, if you create one song, all your eggs are in one basket, you put it out and it doesn't do well, then you're just deflated. And instead of, no, I'm already inspired on this thing. I can't wait to get this out. Share it.
Absolutely.
Work on a new thing. Share it, and then be surprised by the result or the success. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, and it tastes that much better when it comes to this as a surprise than when you're like striving for it.
Yes, 100%.
100%. Absolutely, dude. Well, I really appreciate your time. I love actually ending all these chats with one question that says, "What is one thing that you know now that you wish you knew when you started your career?" And I know you've mentioned a lot of, we've talked a lot of insights. So I don't know if you have anything that you're able to share on that, because you definitely dropped a lot of nuggets.
I think I kind of said it. I'll try to package it a little differently. So
Yeah, whatever, man.
I
Use it.
I can't stress enough. Like I would have fought sooner to really, like, it's so important to work on stuff that you love. You know, over the years, I found myself in a couple situations. Now, when you're like just starting a business or something and you got to take the work and you just want to do as much as possible, like that's important. You know what I mean? But as you're able to start being a little more picky or choosy, like what you want to work on, like I've been in situations where, like in the morning, I just was like not wanting to get out of bed to open up the session to work on a thing that I just was like not into. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like I said, like as a creative, like creatively, that will kill a person more than anything if they're not using their creativity on something that they love or they're passionate about. And so I would just really try, like that's what I would tell my younger self. I feel like I've pretty much fought to do that to the best of my ability. But I found myself in situations like sometimes whenever you try to be like, oh, well, it's with this artist or it's this big opportunity, and you forget about your passion side of it, you're just looking at like how big it would be just based on, I guess, perception. It's a big opportunity. Like those are the things that I've enjoyed the least.
Wow, that's really interesting.
If I wasn't like really into it. Now, when you're into something and you have a big opportunity within that, like obviously that's amazing. That's what you want to go for. But like just taking things because you think it'll be a good thing, it'll just be a miserable process to finish out. Yeah. You know what I mean? And then music, which is supposed to be like your thing, like your dream, like it becomes work and it becomes, you know,
just about to say
inspiring.
That. Exactly. It turns into work, and and you know, people are like, oh, you know, how do you, like people say to me, like, how do you work so many hours in the day? It's like, because I love it. Like, it's not work for me. I don't, you know, like,
right.
I just get to do what I like, you know, it's not work. So, but it turns into work when you start taking those opportunities, and then it's like, shoot, this really sucks. I don't want to do this. Yeah. I don't want to get, absolutely.
Keep it fun. You know, if every day of your life feels like a Saturday and you're spending it the way you would want to spend your free time, like that's one of the best places a person could be in their life, is like to feel like they don't have a job but they get to like work on what they want to work on. Like that's worth working towards.
100%. Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time, man. If you could hang up for 30 more seconds, man. I want to say thank you so much to everybody that listened or watched wherever you listened. Definitely go check out all the stuff that Tommy's doing and all the stuff that he has done, because it's pretty remarkable. We only touched the surface of it, so go check all that stuff out. Definitely consider subscribing to this channel. Go check out his pages. The best way to support the channel is by checking out my own original music. Have a great day. God bless and peace out.